This is a basic framework of our application. This is a demo. We can go through the basic design about the application. And this is there's an application called invoice management. This is the main form for the UI and for the okay. And there are also three other libraries. We can see that the first one is a business logic. This is used for the UI communicate with the backend service and contain the logic of the business. And from there, the UI will call business logic to get the data or update the data from or to the database. And we can see that there's a customer. We use it to get all of, for example, there's a function called get customers. This will get all of the customers from the database. And for the business logic, it does not directly communicate with the database. It also need to access the database through another library we called data access. From data access, there's also a corresponding entity class of customer, and there's we provided the SQL statements, and we will get the data from the database. And from this, we can see that the get database data table is this is from another library we call data provider. The reason why we provide another database data provider is we want to support different kind of databases such as Firebird, SQL Server, or even Oracle DB2, any other we want. So at this point, we want to minimize the code changes when we switch to another database. So we need to uniform generic layer to communicate with the database. So I provided with another library called data provider. In a data provider, it first will check the configuration file. For example, in the app config, we have connection setting that will point to the database, which database we use currently. For example, it point to SQL Server. It will get data from the SQL Server. And for the source code, we need to do any change in the invoice management, business logic, database data access. What we need to do change is in the data provider. And in the data provider, we need for each database, we need to provide a provider. For example, for here is a SQL Server provider, and this is the Firebird provider. They all both inherited from a base class we called provider base. In the provider base, it will do the commonly functions such as get a connection, add a parameter, get a reader dataset, and execute. While all of the detail, all of the each different database, such as the connection or the admin parameter, we need to there is a virtual. I define the functions as virtual. So in the SQL Server provider, we can override the function to do in different functions for each different database, and so that is the same in the Firebird. And there are also another thing I need to demonstrate you is for the Firebird. There are two options for the Firebird database. One is the normally client server application database. That means we need to install the database server on the client machine. So that is similar to SQL Server or Oracle or any other large database. For example, in my local, I installed the SQL Server, and this is a Firebird server. But it's also a little big for the database. So that is what we do in the Firebird provider. But you know, Firebird is also a very lightweight database, so it also provides another option that is embedded database. So I have another some two functions for the spatial embedded factor provider for the Firebird, and because these functions are some spatial, so I just separated. For the Firebird data embedded provider, we don't need the client to install any database engine. It just need to copy the to run in the application. So that is enough. So that is a special one. So I just separated. Um, so for the running, I can do a testing for you in the app config. For example, we have a support three different database. The first one is the Firebird. The second one is the Firebird embedded. So in fact, the database is the same. Is also all of the both files are the invoice.fdb. But why we need to separate it together? That reason is the embedded Firebird engine is quite different than the Firebird. Normally, client server Firebird. So we need to provide two different providers for the Firebird embedded version. And the third one is the server. So when we run in the application, we just need to change if we switch the database, we just need to change the configuration. For example, the server, we can run it. All of the customers get from the server, because the server I just imported the script you provided, so all of the data is there, and we have many different data. For example, A, B, okay, and okay. So right now we can running another one is, for example, the Firebird. And then running the application. Okay, so it also lists the customers, because I just imported the 10 records of the customers. So it just show this one. Okay. The next I want to test for you is for the client to use the Firebird embedded. So how to test it? Because you know I already installed the Firebird server on my side, so if I can stop the service and running our application with the Firebird embedded, if that is also successful, that means we don't need to install anything on the client side. Okay, so I just give you this testing. For example, in my local this is the Firebird server. I can stop it. Okay, so this is stop it right now, and we can. Okay, so I can use the Firebird to test again to see what happened. You can see that it will set unable to complete network request to host. The host is my local host. Okay, so normally the client service version of Firebird is not working, so we can try to change to the Firebird embedded and run it again. Okay, you can see that we can get all the list from the database. So for the embedded, what we just need to do is to develop our application and deploy it to the client, and do not need to install any database engine on the client side. We just need to some extra assembly files. I can show you what we need to add. just this one, FBEmbed.dal, and these three one. Okay, so that is very small and easy to for the deployment. Um, okay, so that is all of what I have done so far, and so you can see from the UI, I didn't implement most of the functions you required in the demo. But I think that is some basic functions for the UI, and the more important, I think, is the design and how to design the application and for the database communication, and so I think it is enough to show you what I can done for your application. Okay. By the way, I didn't use the Telerik OIM tools because I checked it is really similar to the entity framework of the which from the Microsoft, um, and I think the most of the OR mapping file tool is not very good because it will impact the performance of the application. So I think we can do it for ourselves, just similar to what I have shown to you. We just can define the model and to do the communication with the client with the database, and I think that is enough. Okay, thank you.